Hi, this is Dave Smith with No Kill in Motion. I'm here with Alan Rosenberg from the New Jersey Animal Observer and Aubrie Kavanaugh from No Kill Huntsville. It is Pit Bull Awareness Month, October 2020, and I'm excited to talk about this. In Denver on the ballot, 2J is peeling back BSL. It is not getting rid of the ban. There is actually a special license and some other limitations, but you could actually own it if this have a pit bull in your family. If this actually goes through, I have no idea where it's going to go. It's the first time it's been on the Denver ballot. We lost in Aurora, the next town over, twice already, but this has been changing over time. What's really interesting is a study just came out from Kevin Morris from Denver University. It showed that over the span of BSL in Denver, over $100 million in direct costs and then in indirect revenue have been lost by Denver because of this ban. It's an amazing amount of money, but the important part of it is it's not just the money. There is no evidence that anything about it made Denver safer. And with that, BSL is such a big topic. I don't think I'm even going to ask a question. Aubrie, I'm going to start with you and what you're seeing about BSL around the nation, what you think of maybe what's happening in Colorado.
I think that when people look at Denver, they just kind of shake their heads and throw their hands up and say, what are you thinking? I mean, Colorado, I think, is viewed as a pretty progressive state, and particularly the city of Denver. So when we see, on one hand, we've got Denver that's had BSL, breed-specific legislation, for 30 years, and now we have a study to show that $100 million was spent with no gain. And then we have places, a state like Alabama, which has a dangerous dog law, which is breed blind. It has nothing to do with breed at all. People are just like, what in the world is going on? Up is down, down is up. With the passage of time, we've seen more and more places repeal these bans and just say, you know what, we thought this would help. It's not helping. At the same time, there are other places, I call it lazy legislation, because what they do is a lot of places enact it for some emotional reason without it being based on data and science. So there are some little pockets that are still adopting breed bans or breed restrictions. But again, back to Denver, it's like, Denver, what are you thinking? And I think what shocked me about Denver was earlier in the year, there was this proposal that it wasn't going to outlaw it, but it was going to completely change it. As I understand it, the entire city council was on board with this. But at the last minute, the mayor said no, and he vetoed it. So I'm glad that it's actually on your ballot. I mean, I'm going to be sitting here in Alabama watching and hoping that Denver lives up to its reputation as not only as a progressive community, but as a community that doesn't continue to waste tax dollars to no end.
Yeah, and the Denver Council, just to be clear, it wasn't like unanimous, but they did pass it, and then the mayor actually vetoed it. And there is an overtone. Actually, it's more than an overtone, and we've talked about racial equity and social equity in animal sheltering lately. BSL has a clear racial component. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Alan, or BSL in general.
Well, yes. Luckily, in my state, BSL has been illegal for like 30 years, but the racial and inequity component is very clear. I think it's been written about in the past quite a bit, but largely pit bull bans were largely tied to racial segregation, where pit bulls were associated by local governments as associated with minority communities and predominantly Black communities, and they wanted to institute pit bull bans in large part to keep those people, so to speak, as they would say, out of their communities. So it was part of this larger social dynamic of segregation, and it really is disturbing. And also, there is a animal control component where it was part of this heavy-handed animal control philosophy, where we're going to go into these neighborhoods and take people's dogs and kill them. And that philosophy has destroyed the relationship between shelters and those communities. And I strongly believe that's one of the reasons why adoption rates, as we talked about in the past, are so low in minority communities and underserved communities. And if we were to just adopt animals out in those communities at the rate we do in other communities, we would end the killing tomorrow in shelters. So there's a lot to this problem here, but a lot of it ties into social issues, and it really ultimately not only hurts people but ends up killing the pit bulls in the shelters as well as other animals in the shelters that don't get adopted because those communities have been marginalized and and separated from the shelters.
The article in Denver University, when they announced this, I'm just going to read this one paragraph. Morris, who's Kevin Morris, the primary author on this, Morris says the most stunning finding depicts unequal enforcement of the pit bull ban in the city's most vulnerable areas, particularly in places, the study explains, racially diverse communities intersect with predominantly white neighborhoods. I mean, that is a remarkable thing. You need to read the whole study if you have time. I'll have to make sure that we get the link when we post this on Facebook. Aubrie, you have to say, I know you're thinking of something.
Yeah, I'd like to make a point too. Even to this day, these people that are using these bans as a reason to either seize animals or destroy animals, they don't get it right, because even people that are seasoned in the animal sheltering industry can look at a dog and not really know what that dog is. To this day, we have dogs that are labeled not only by the media as pit bulls when they're not, by people in the shelter industry when that dog may not have any pit bull in them at all. And of course, we need to qualify, pit bull is not a breed. There are a number of breeds of dogs that have routinely been lumped in together and called pit bulls. And there's plenty of reading out there on that. But even at that, most of the time they're not getting it right. In these places that have breed bans or restrictions, it's not like they're DNA testing these animals. And even if they did, they would find that most of them are not pit bull type dogs. And even if they do have, let's say that there's 5% pit bull type dog. Well, what's the 5%? Is it the back right leg? I mean, and I think Animal Farm Foundation even has some infographics to that extent. Okay, even if a dog has a little bit of pit bull type dog in it by DNA, well, is it the left ear? I mean, it's kind of nonsensical. I don't know how you can enforce a law if you're not real sure what that subject group is that you're dealing with anyway. So I think these laws are fatally flawed at the start. And getting back to what we've been talking about with the racial thing, I do want to, at some point, I want to give a plug for a book. A few years ago, was alerted to Bronwyn Dickey's book called Pitbull, The Battle Over an American Icon. And I read it looking for some specific information. I would recommend that everyone read this book. Mine has highlighting in it. I've got tabs on it. I mean, it's kind of worn because of having read through it so many times.
I love that book. It was a great book. It
talks not just about the dogs themselves, but it talks about our society and how we view certain breeds of dogs based on who owns the dog. And it plays right in to all these things about the racial inequality. So definitely Pitbull. And another one, if you're in a reading mood, because I use this for my research paper on Pitbull type dogs I did years ago. It's by Karen DeLeese, The Pitbull Placebo. Karen works for the National Canine Research Council, which is the authority on research when it comes to dog bite related fatalities. So these two books are just go-to books. If you're interested in the bigger issue about this, I encourage all advocates to be smart on this issue, just because I think it's our responsibility to try to quelch this legislation anywhere it happens. And speaking of that, David, I'm curious for you, a question for you. What do you think is going to happen with the ballot measure?
I really don't know. I feel that the vast majority of people, or at least the majority of people, understand this subject. Denver is fairly progressive on these types of issues. We do have, of course, in my social circle, there's a lot of animal advocates, but even outside of that, I speak to people about it who are not, and they didn't seem to think that it was that big an issue. If they do, it really only takes about 60 seconds to explode the myths that are in their heads. But those myths are out there. So that's what scares me, right? Is the fake news about pit bulls, so to speak, is a dangerous thing. And it's been out there for a long time and it's common knowledge. But I think there's been a lot of education. The one group, Replace BSL, has done a wonderful job here in Denver. And keep in mind, Jen Dudley, who now has Mile High Rescue, but before that, she reversed the ban in Castle Rock. She wouldn't put it this way, but she kind of did it all by herself. And she showed the power of one person. Jen is just a great advocate. Brought it down in Castle Rock. They're a great example. They are just south of Denver. If we get rid of it in Denver, what's exciting is we can get rid of it in Aurora. I think we're down to 6 communities in Colorado that still have it. I really want to see us beat it here. And if not, Replace BSL has been dogged, excuse the pun, in actually pursuing this. When we lost with the mayor's veto, they did not stop. They went and got this ballot on there. And I think if we do lose, they're not done. And I intend to support them, all the way. I'm going to close. We're out of time, but I'm going to say one thing. Aubrie's recommendations of those books are excellent. She's not just an avid reader. She's got a book called It's Not Rocket Science, which is a great book about no-kill and how no-kill Huntsville came to be. I recommend you also read that book because I think it's something that everyone should look at. We haven't mentioned that in a while. We will be back again. This has been No Kill in Motion. I'm David Smith from No Kill, Colorado. Thank you, Aubrie Kavanaugh from No Kill Huntsville and Alan Rosenberg from New Jersey Animal Observer. We'll see you next week.